Hello there, fandoms of the world. My name is the Geek Theorist, and welcome to another RWBY theory. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the show's fan-favorite villains, Cinder Fall, the person largely responsible for the fall of Beacon and the deaths of Penny Polendina and Pyrrha Nikos. However, what if I propose to you that Cinder is not the character we think she is? That's right, folks. Today's theory asks the question, what if Cinder Fall is not evil? Let's discuss. Part 1. The Foundation. So before we get all the way into things, I wanted to explain essentially how I came up with this theory, or at least what got me thinking that this might be a possibility. As of right now, we are currently 4 episodes into Volume 4, and Cinder is being shown as an almost broken, or at least damaged character, after being hit with RWBY's Silver Eye blast. What's interesting to note, and what really got me thinking about Cinder as a whole, is the fact that at this point, Cinder is almost being played as a sympathetic character. She's being put down by other members of Salem's villainous organization. She's being questioned by Salem herself. And to be honest, it seems as though the writers want the audience to feel sympathy for her, despite the fact that she committed all those atrocious acts during the fall of Beacon. This is a common strategy used in writing and media to get the audience on the side of a certain character. By painting them as the outcast or underdog, someone who needs to come back or gain strength to achieve their goals, the writers make it easy for the audience to root for this character through a subtle emotional appeal. Yet, in the case of Cinder, this seemingly makes no sense. There's a distinct difference between creating a complex, layered villain with their own personal motivations and creating a character that the audience genuinely wants to support. In this case, there's a disparity between the established character and the emotional appeal. So then, I thought that this could possibly be foreshadowing a change of allegiances for Cinder, but again, this didn't make sense within the story as we know it so far. Redemption arcs can be some of the most compelling stories told through narrative, but there comes a point when a character is beyond redemption. Compare Cinder to a character like Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example. At the point in the story where Zuko's redemption began, he had yet to do anything that would truly make him irredeemable. Sure, he had been pursuing Aang for quite some time with the intent of bringing him to the Fire Lord, and those around him may have committed atrocities, but Zuko himself had committed no act which would prevent him from becoming a sympathetic character after reforming himself. Now, when we look at Cinder on the other hand, things are quite a bit different. Cinder is responsible for orchestrating the death of Penny, as well as the fall of Beacon, as well as murdering Pyrrha and the Fall Maiden herself. These acts make her irredeemable, not only within the context of the show, but in the eyes of the fans. After all, Pyrrha and Penny were both fan-favorite characters, and even if the writers somehow managed to make a Cinder redemption arc work within the narrative, it would surely not go over well with the fans. And yet, we see more examples of this foreshadowing time and time again, in this case with the characters of Mercury and Emerald. In recent episodes, the expressions on both these characters' faces have seemed to convey disgust and horror with their situation, rather than satisfaction, as I've talked about in my weekly episode reviews. Furthermore, these two have yet to truly do anything that would make them incorrigible. Sure, Emerald's semblance resulted in Penny's death and Yang's hallucination, but I think within the established world of RWBY, it's still possible for both these characters to be redeemed, and I think a redemption arc for one or both of them in the future is possible and even likely. However, considering their loyalty to Cinder, this becomes a bit more complicated. Their apparent horror with the situation comes largely as a result of what's happening to Cinder, and the odds of them defecting from Salem's faction without Cinder are slim to none. So then, it stands to reason that if Emerald and Mercury were to receive a redemption arc, so too would Cinder, as this is the only real possibility when the loyalty of Emerald and Merc is taken into consideration. But then again, we see that Cinder is beyond redemption. So then, what could all these signs be pointing towards, if not a redemption arc? Consider this. What if Cinder's role is not that of a Prince Zuko, but rather of a different famous fictional character? One from a world of magic, witchcraft and wizardry, and one who appeared antagonistic at first, but turned out to be one of our hero's greatest allies in the end. Let's make a checklist, shall we? 1. Member of an evil organization who infiltrates and becomes a part of the school? Check. 2. Murders the headmaster of said school? Check. 3. Becomes close with the series' big bad? Check. And 4. Helps to orchestrate their downfall in the end? Check. That's right, folks. What if I told you that Cinder Fall is Severus Snape? When we take all the current signs into account and rule out the impossible, all that remains is the truth. Cinder is not going through a redemption arc because she needs no redemption. She has been an anti-hero this entire time. And now that the foundation is laid, I'm going to explain how. Part 2. The Beginning. So to begin to understand how Cinder could have been good this whole time, we need to head back as far as we've seen from Cinder, back to when she first met Mercury and Emerald. Again, we see a kind of disconnect between how the character is portrayed and how she is perceived. Cinder finds these children who, sure, aren't exactly pure of heart, but who need guidance, who need a mentor of some sort, and she takes them out of their current situations and under her wing. Sure, one could argue that she simply needs henchmen to help her accomplish her goals, but if such were the case, she could have chosen anyone. These aren't the actions of a heartless villain, but of a nurturing, caring individual. And sure, this could just be a layer to her character. After all, not all villains have to be completely devoid of sympathy. But I definitely think that it's worth noting, especially when considered alongside how Cinder is currently being portrayed in Volume 4. In both situations, the villain, the person we're supposed to be rooting against, is playing off common tropes of the protagonist or of positive characters. I find it hard to believe that they would give us so many reasons to want to support this character without any payoff in the end. Part 3. The Fall Maiden. Now here's where things do get a bit tricky. But notice that I identified Cinder as an anti-hero, not a hero. Here's the reason why. After assembling her team with Emerald and Mercury, Cinder tries and later succeeds in murdering the current Fall Maiden and stealing her powers. Yes, I'm not going to deny that Cinder straight up murders someone, which for sure is bad. However, now we need to begin questioning what Cinder's motive is. If we assume that my theory is correct and that Cinder is an anti-hero, then her primary motive would be stopping Salem. I do think it's entirely believable that this is the case, too. Sure, Cinder may not exactly be a good person, but it's possible that after learning Salem's plan, she realized just how horrific the consequences would be, and began forming a plan to stop her. To do so, she would need power, and a lot of it. Furthermore, at this stage, she needs to earn Salem's trust to get as close to her as possible so that her loyalty to Salem does not come into question. So then, when she is instructed to kill the Fall Maiden, completing this task accomplishes two things. 1. She gains the Fall Maiden's powers, which may be instrumental in the final fight against Salem. And 2. She demonstrates her loyalty to Salem, allowing her to prove herself and get closer to the villain. Now, some people may argue that I'm stretching a bit with this explanation, which I think may be entirely valid. However, as we've now seen in the case of Raven, even characters with no qualms about murder, theft, and other villainous acts want to do whatever possible to stop Salem. So then, just because Cinder is also capable of committing such acts does not necessarily prevent her from wanting to defeat Salem. I believe that murdering the Fall Maiden was, in Cinder's mind, only one step in an overall plan to take Salem down. Part 4. The Fall of Beacon, and Everybody Dies. Now, I know that quite a bit goes down between our last point and this, but ultimately, everything in the first 3 volumes prior to the Fall of Beacon is Cinder setting up her plan to orchestrate the event. So, for the most part, there's not much to consider. However, when the event finally occurs, there's quite a bit to discuss, and a lot of what goes down actually lends credence to this theory. Let's all agree now that every step taken by Cinder was calculated and intentional. She was able to manipulate the matchup of each round of the Vital Festival, and was even able to manipulate the competitors themselves to an extent using Emerald's semblance. Each move was specific and accomplished a specific task, which is important because it means that Cinder had almost an infinite number of choices to make when deciding how to orchestrate this series of events. And what choices did she make? First, there was the death of Penny Polendina. This is the first action which at first makes Cinder seem irredeemable. However, consider again the fact that Cinder could have chosen so many different ways to orchestrate this event, and yet the way she chose involved killing the only robotic character in the entire Vital tournament. The only character with the potential to come back to life. Now, you could argue that Penny's death served a specific purpose to raise distrust for Atlas, which would not have worked had any other character died. But again, I'll argue that Cinder could have chosen so many different paths in the fall of Beacon, and really, seeing the Atlas soldiers turning on civilians was enough to cause this distrust anyway. Cinder specifically chose to have Penny die, and if we accept that all her moves were intentional, then this is certainly something interesting to think about, considering the possibility of Penny coming back to life. Then we look at another character who supposedly died, Pyrrha Nikos. If Cinder killed Pyrrha, that absolutely makes her redemption impossible. However, as many have predicted, and as the show is seemingly beginning to support, it's possible that Pyrrha is not actually dead. Remember, when Pyrrha died, we saw Cinder turn her into some kind of golden dust, which is something that we haven't seen at any other point of character death throughout the entire series. Chalk it up to Cinder's maiden powers if you will, but taken in consideration with Ruby's strange dreams in Volume 4, and it is becoming more and more apparent that Pyrrha may be alive in some manner. If so, then it's reasonable to believe that Cinder spared her life, as it was Cinder's actions which turned Pyrrha into the strange golden dust and may have preserved her life. So then we have to ask, why would Cinder save Pyrrha instead of simply killing her? There's the possibility that Salem wants to use Pyrrha for some greater purpose, but I think it's just as likely that Cinder simply spared her because Cinder is not evil, and didn't want to kill Pyrrha. Finally, we come to the supposed death of Ozpin, who we already know by this point is still quite alive. This particular detail lends so much support to the theory that Cinder is not evil. First, again, I'll draw the parallel between Cinder and Snape. As I stated before, if Cinder's motive is to get as close to Salem as possible, then killing Ozpin would be the act which would earn her the most favor in the eyes of Salem. Just as Snape agreed to kill Dumbledore, Cinder may too have come to some kind of agreement with Ozpin, an agreement which he had to keep hidden from even his closest advisors in Crow, Glinda, and Ironwood. However, I also think it's possible that Cinder and Ozpin had no communication, and that she simply planned on sparing his life the same way she did with Pyrrha's. We don't even know if she won the fight with Ozpin, however. It seemed that way, but so much is still unclear. As such, if we only take into consideration what we currently know, the facts are that Cinder, tasked with killing Ozpin, did not accomplish this task, and yet told Salem that Ozpin is dead. So now, we take a look at the things that Cinder actually did during the fall of Beacon. Of the 4 characters she supposedly killed, only one of them is actually dead for sure, that being the previous Fall Maiden. And this is the only character that truly had to die for Cinder to gain the Maiden's powers and prove herself to Salem. The other 3 either remain alive or have the potential to come back in some way. Remember again that Cinder was able to make each decision to accomplish a specific goal in a specific way, and the method she chose seemingly has the fewest possible casualties. Why would a true villain choose this manner? Why would she spare the lives of Pyrrha and Ozpin and then lie to Salem? Why would the writers seemingly paint this villain as a sympathetic character? The answer is clear. Part 5. Cinder Fall is not evil. After looking at all of the decisions and actions that Cinder has made throughout the entirety of the series so far, it becomes a real possibility that she may not be the villain we all perceive her to be. From both the perspective of the story itself and of the storytellers, we see distinct reasons why this is the case. Villains do not spare heroes' lives. Villains do not choose to avoid death. Villains are never shown to be the underdogs, the ones who need to rise up and fight back against adversity. Cinder is not a villain. She is an anti-hero, and perhaps one of the greatest assets in the fight against Salem. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to leave your thoughts in the comments below whether you agree with this theory or disagree, and why. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed. This has been The Geek Theorist. Until next time.